This is your reminder that the BBC has yet to address the consistent transphobic leanings in its news coverage, and while the team behind Doctor Who is not connected to this in any way since this is a BBC-owned property, I'm going to keep pointing it out until the problem gets resolved. Links in a pinned comment below if you don't know what I'm talking about. I'll stop saying it when it stops being a problem. All right. If you're not going to lower your bubble, can you at least try to look beyond it? Doctor Who continues! Episode 5 of the latest season, Dot and Bubble. Oh boy. Okay, so while I think on balance, I personally still like 73 Yards better overall, this is excellent. And regardless of my own personal preference, I think this is ultimately one I can say has stuck with me harder, and 73 Yards stuck with me pretty well. This, the main thrust of why this hit me as hard as it did, we're not going to get to for a little while, because I'm not going to cross that bridge until we hit the point in the story where I actually fully realized it. And that point is later than I would like to admit, but we'll deal with that and the fact that it took me so long when we get there. As we start, we begin with our opening character, Lindy. And she seems to just be light and bubbly and pleasant and living in a, well, in a bubble. In a force field, but also a social media bubble, obviously. That's literally how her day starts, saying hi to everyone else within her bubble. She doesn't even have to think about how to move about where she wants to go. The little device called the Dot that helps maintain her bubble, that just tells her, turn this way, go that way, start brushing your teeth. Yeah, pretty simple, pretty straightforward, and I thought I knew what it was doing. And what I'm about to say, it isn't not doing this, but this is not the main point. But it starts out with a social media bubble. It starts out with what I suspected was going to become mostly a commentary on toxic positivity.
You look so good, baby. Aw, Keeper, you're so kind.
Everybody, reinforcing bright and happy, and everybody's smiling all the time. And I found myself thinking, like, I bet you this might be a little bit like Nosedive, which is a Black Mirror episode that I appreciate and have immense respect for, but stretches of it are really hard for me to watch. But that one is very much about the recursive toxic positivity of social media extrapolated out into a sci-fi situation. I thought we were going to do something similar here. We don't, though that is, I think, in many ways still an aspect of it, just not the main thrust of it. But the Doctor breaks in, tries to say that he needs to help her. There's something out there. People are dying, and she doesn't know him. So she doesn't want to listen, so she blocks him and just goes about her day, despite the human-eating slugs that have been taking over Fine Time, this bubble in which she and other very privileged young people are all living. And we get a little bit more, just a sense of her, what her day's like, what existence here is like. And again, positive to the point of being suspicious. And like, is anybody even allowed to be concerned? Like, there's one guy going, hey, has anyone heard from these people? And he does seem to have some concern for people. That's Gothic Paul. But like, everybody else is just like, oh, it's fine. Everything's fine. We're in fine time. It's all good. Hey, it's Vera during the edit. Something I noticed while collecting footage for this, there is a subscriber number that we can see for each of the people that Lindy interacts with through the bubble. And Gothic Paul, the only one to ever express anything close to negativity, has by far the lowest subscriber number of anybody we see. So again, toxic positivity may not be the main focus of this, but boy, is it present. So she gets to her job, which she only has to work 2 hours a day at. But she gets to her job, and then Ruby jumps in. Now, she's not exactly nice to Ruby, but she doesn't block her immediately. And even while calling her stupid, does listen to her.
Oh, my life, you're stupid.
Eventually, a little bit. And Ruby says the line that I referenced at the beginning, and which I will be coming back to.
You could lower your bubble.
I am not lowering my bubble.
Okay, can you stay inside and look beyond it?
And she realizes she's alone in a room that other people are supposed to be in. There's supposed to be other workers here, but they're not. And then eventually dropping the bubble and looking and seeing this thing eating her coworker. And I'm not going to call the slugs in and of themselves the most horrifying thing Doctor Who has ever come up with in terms of design or MO or any of the rest of that. I will say, however, that the way they're presented is pretty unsettling, that like they're just right there and these people are not noticing, and that it's not even like any kind of supernatural or cloaking thing. It's nothing like that. It is actually just straight up, you just didn't notice. Honestly, it feels a little bit like The Silence, but where nobody noticing that they're there is those people's fault. It's not a trick of this monster. It's the life that these people lead. They don't see it. Obviously, that does snap her out of it a bit, although she can't even navigate out of the office. And this is something that I can see being a slightly credulity-stretching issue, especially as it comes up later when she's on the street and just walks into the signpost. Some people feel like, how can she not just know how to move around stuff? Well, because she's having to make decisions that she's never had to make before. The things like how to get around something is not something she's had to contend with. She hasn't had to think about it. She's followed instructions. She's followed instructions, walk, turn right, walk forward, etc. But she's never had to know what those meant or why she was doing them or what they accomplished. All she had to do was follow the instructions and go about her day. So when confronted with an obstacle that, at least initially, she probably does not even realize is normally solved by turning left and walking a little bit and then turning back and continuing, yeah, I actually buy it. Is it pushing at the edges of the extreme of how living that kind of confined life would make someone? Maybe. I think it's still within the realm of plausibility. And there is a difference between full believability and plausibility. I think it also helps that we see another character later who clearly is able to navigate, partially because he's outside the bubble on occasion.
I open the bubble, drop my songs, and then I turn the dot off for the rest of the day.
So it is not that these people are incapable of learning, they just have never had to. One of the things that's interesting for me is that when trying to exit the room, she does, put the bubble back up to get the instructions, but she's not just putting it up for guidance, she's putting it up for comfort. She feels uncomfortable when she's not in the bubble. It's where she feels safe. And yeah, that's going to matter. We're getting even more now attention drawn to Susan Twist, who is recurring. I believe she appears in this one as a mummy. It's flatly pointed out where she has appeared before.
He's the face of the ambulance in Postarion 3.
No, I've seen her somewhere else.
So whereas previous episode 73 Yards, we had Ruby just kind of recognizing her, but not being sure where she saw her. Now both the Doctor and Ruby are not only recognizing her, but can name somewhere where they saw her before. So there's no way this doesn't come up as a thing. Probably 2 episodes from now when we hit the beginning of the 2-parter that is going to give us the finale. Boy, this season's way too short. I'm not going to dwell on that. I did a whole video on it just a couple days ago, so feel free to go ahead and check that out. But that gets dropped in there, and I am taking my time getting to the big thing about this episode because I think there's a number of smaller points along the way that are getting lost in the conversation of what is ultimately the point of the episode. So I'm probably going to spend the most time talking about that. But like, there's this other stuff along the way, which is interesting and I think well done. So we have Lindy getting out and eventually running into Ricky September, who's something of a pop influencer kind of person. And he helps guide her past these things that she can barely navigate around. But he gives her instructions like what she's used to, and she's able to get to him. And I like their interactions quite a bit, actually. I like that she points out her hugging him was the first time she'd ever hugged anybody.
That's the first time I've ever done that.
Oh, no, well, so every day we walk past monsters.
No, I mean the hug.
But I like Ricky September. I like that he is sort of a glimpse at somebody who, yes, exists within this bubble, but also is, goes out and touches grass every now and then, effectively. But I like that he kind of pauses and is concerned when he finds out that that was her first hug.
That was your first hug?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, I should have asked.
No, I made you. It was my fault. I shouldn't have. It was nice.
And there's sort of a consent moment between them just for holding hands, which normally I'd say like consent for holding hands, that's a bit much, except that if she's not used to physical contact with people at all, yeah, actually that probably should have some consent behind it. And it's cute and it's sweet and it's not overly played up as like, oh, we must establish consent moment. It just plays well. So Ricky tries to look into getting them some help, and we get the thing that he doesn't tell Lindy, which is that Homeworld's completely gone. They have all been eaten by these things. This thing actually has quite an impressive body count. And Doctor Who can certainly have a body count sometimes. This one, like, even if we take off the table the fact that all of Homeworld is gone, just how many people we see get pulled into the maws of these things. It's a bit. It's a lot. So anyway, in a way, he's trying to protect Lindy from the facts of the situation, but she gets to charge up and she reconnects with the Doctor and Ruby, and then they're trying to get out, and the Doctor figures out why things have been happening the way that they have, that some people haven't been eaten, and in fact seem to be getting ignored by the slugs. Now this is, I think, something that logistically doesn't get a full explanation, but I also think it doesn't really need one. But it's that they're being done in alphabetical order. Now, if these slugs were a completely natural phenomenon that, they just somehow got into the city, that shouldn't happen. How the heck would a bunch of giant slugs even know what people's last names were? Well, you know what does know? The dot. The dot that maintains the bubble. And it is going down the list alphabetically, because that's the way that an artificial mind is more likely to think. Let's just go in order. Now, this is something that isn't dwelled on, but I also quite like the small moments that we get, which is that the Doctor basically indicates the dot hates these people.
If that dot has achieved sentience, and then it has to spend all day hovering and listening to you lot chattering away, I'm not being rude, but I think it's learned to hate you.
What I like about that is so often when you get, some kind of mechanically minded or algorithmically based or computer villain or whatever, turning on people, generally, you are most likely getting this sort of, it is the logical conclusion because people only destroy themselves, and the only way to attain true peace is to eliminate all people. Like, that's the standard thing you get. Occasionally you'll get something like it's just not fully understanding and it's just coming to a faulty conclusion. That's what you got in something like the Doctor Who episode Smile. It was just dealing with stuff it wasn't programmed to deal with, and it makes a leap that is not good, but it didn't have the basis to understand what was going on. So those are generally what you're going to get. The idea that it just hates them, that it's driven by the emotional feeling of hate, the vapidity, the hollowness of these people's lives, and it has to help them. It has to move them around, get them from place to place, and just listen to them chatter and jabber, hollowness, emptiness, nothing, day in, day out. I think it's debatable whether the Dot is fully sentient AI, because in theory, if it had achieved full sentience and sapience, it might have been able to, move away from a systematic approach like going alphabetical. But it certainly has developed enough of itself to develop a sense of hate and resentment. I just like that idea, and I especially like that there's no indication that the hate is based off of the thing I'm going to be spending more time talking about on the back end. It's just based off of, I can't stand you people anymore. It's a small, I say small idea. It's actually, I think it's a neat idea, but it's a small part of this episode. It basically just gets a quick line for the motivation of these things before Lindy's Dot tries to kill them, and Ricky is trying to fend it away as she finishes opening up the door, and she turns him in. Because when she thinks this thing's about to get her...
I know everything about him. He changed his name to Ricky September when he reached 50,000 followers, but check your files, he was born Coombs. C comes before P.
Because as bright and happy and shiny as the world within the bubble is, these are not real connections. These are not real relationships. This is not true community. That makes it that much easier, if you feel it's what you need to do, to just sacrifice somebody. She stabs him in the back to save her own life, despite idolizing him. Because she doesn't know him. Not really. And that makes it easier to just throw him under the bus. And then, she reaches the other survivors. And she reaches Ruby and the doctor. And finally, the penny drops. So, the doctor and Ruby turn to Lindy and these two other people and offer them a spot in the TARDIS because they're planning to just basically go out into the wild. And the simple fact is, they don't know how to live out there. Like, even if there are no giant slugs out there, they don't know how to do anything. That's been very clearly demonstrated. And the doctor offers them a chance to just get in the TARDIS and he'll take them wherever. And they won't go because it's quite impossible for them to have in-person contact with him.
Screen-to-screen contact is just about acceptable, but in person, that's impossible.
And here's where I need to talk a little bit about my own discomfort. And I don't mean discomfort in a criticism. The fact that this made me uncomfortable is phenomenal. And it's not just the fact that this group is a bunch of white supremacists. That's not what makes me uncomfortable. What makes me uncomfortable is how long it took me to even think that, much less realize it. It wasn't even her pointing out that they can't travel with him and singling out the doctor, not mentioning Ruby as being a problem at all. It wasn't until this line,
"Excuse me, sir, that's voodoo."
That's when it hit me. And the fact that it took that long, because I can look back and think of every hint, every red flag I either failed to notice altogether or I noticed but didn't attribute it to the actual cause. Because this does not come out of nowhere. Right from the beginning, when she sees the doctor and blocks him without saying a word. Now, my assumption at the time, and I think probably the one many viewers will make, is that this is somebody not on her friends list contacting her, block. Hell, I do that. But I didn't think back on it initially when she starts interacting with Ruby and actually communicating with her. I didn't think back, like she's being uncooperative, she's being complainy, she's being rude to Ruby, but she is willing to talk to her. And she blocked the doctor right off. I wonder why. I didn't even think that. And then the doctor shows up again. And She's way more argumentative with him. There's repeated times where he says something, she doesn't listen. Ruby effectively has to reiterate that exact thing, and then reluctantly still, but she will listen. The one that, when I finally realized that after the episode was over, I was like, oh my God. Her being surprised that he and Ruby were in the same room.
You lied to me. This is like a conspiracy. Who are you?
Now, here's the thing. I did clock that was odd. Because, like, the natural assumption would have been that, oh, they're just not used to existing in a space with other people around them, because they're always in their bubble. But the thing is, she does. And by that point, we already knew that because she's used to going to a job where there are other people. She doesn't interact with them directly. She keeps her bubble up. But they're still all in the same room. So her shock could not have been the simple fact that they're in the same room when that's an unusual thing. I did note that was odd, but I didn't take the step to think about why that might be, or why she is listening to Ruby and not the doctor, or the moment where she suddenly realizes that the doctor's the same one that she was talking to earlier, and she didn't realize that any sooner.
Didn't I block you? I knew it. I did. I thought that you just looked the same, but you're...
Because she thinks they all look the same. They being black men. I mean, potentially black people in general. I would like to think you probably at least recognize if one had been a man or one been a woman, but jeez, all that and more. More than I'm either recalling to mention or probably more than I even noticed.
I know this is wrong, and when this is over, he is going to be so disciplined. I can't wait.
All happened in front of me. Even the things that I noticed, like, that's odd, I didn't stop and think of why that was. And that, in a nutshell, is privilege. That is white privilege. The fact that I could see so many...
But just give him a shot, okay? I think he's not as stupid as he looks.
In hindsight, not subtle. Red flags. Hell, the simple fact that there wasn't a single black person in that entire bubble, all those faces, it didn't clock for me. I'm not even going to say I didn't notice. I did, but it didn't register as anything. And that is privilege. And it's a reminder that as progressively minded as I believe myself to be and try to be, and for all the various things about me that I deal with crap about, that I get othered for being trans, for not being heterosexual, for being polyamorous, for being neurodivergent, for being a sex worker, despite all that, I'm still white. And that still means I have blinders to a certain degree that I should be aware of. That's the thing. I'm not mad at this episode for making me notice the blinders. I need to be aware of them if I'm ever going to try and get better. But that's the other thing that, I need to be aware of. I need to try to get better. But I can't just opt out of white privilege. I will have it every day of my life. That no matter what else goes on, no matter how bad things get for me because of any of the other things about me that results in me being othered, it would all be worse if I wasn't white. That is a fact, and that will always be a fact. So I think that's a big part of why this kind of shook me and stuck with me the way that it did, is not just the reveal that these people are freaking white supremacists. And let's be very, that is literally what they are.
Because you, sir, are not one of us. I mean, so you were kind, although it was your duty to save me, obviously.
It is her literal belief that not only is a black man like the doctor beneath her, but it is his duty to assist her and then go away.
Because it is our God-given duty to maintain the standards of fine time forever.
This is not just racism. This is white supremacy. And while you can't be a white supremacist without being a racist, not all racists are white supremacists. There's, that's worth parsing. Because if you're going to describe this culture accurately, you're not going to say racist. You're going to say white supremacist. And it just shows that they think because of just the quirk of their genes resulting in the skin tone they have, they can just go out into the wild and they'll be fine.
And we can go out there to this planet and we can fight it and tame it and own it. Be pioneers, just like our ancestors.
Which is actually a real key thing to always understand about white supremacy. They literally had a chance to live. They had a chance to leave, to be saved. They wouldn't take it because it was offered by a black man.
And I can save your lives! Now let me!
White supremacy is a bubble. It is blinding. It is dangerous to the people within it. Even the people benefiting from it, it is ultimately bad for them too. But so many will do what these people did. They will choose the bubble.
I am not lowering my bubble.
And while the technology of the bubble may be gone, she still chooses that bubble. They all do. They will not voluntarily exit the bubble of white supremacy and the belief that they are inherently somehow better than people like him. And Gatwa's performance is phenomenal. There is no rational reason for them not to just let him help. Let him save them. But white supremacy isn't rational. Even though they may not be willing to accept the fact that they are choosing to go out and die, they may espouse the belief that that's not going to happen. They are choosing to die rather than take his help. And the doctor being turned on by the people he's trying to save hasn't really happened like this before. It hasn't happened very much at all. It did happen in Midnight, but Midnight took pretty much the entire length of the episode. So like 35 to 40 minutes of communication breakdowns and escalating tension in that room. It required constant hammering of stress and tension for that whole thing to break down and for them to turn on him. Here, it's during a moment of calm and peace. It's actually the absence of threat. Because when there was a threat, she was willing to at least listen to him, often filtered through Ruby, but she accepted some help from him when she knew for a certainty she would die if she didn't. But now she's not in that situation. Things are calm, things are peaceful, and they all just turn their back on him. The amount he had to convey in his performance in reaction to that staggers me. And he absolutely nails it. But what I really think is important about this is that he is offering to help them even after they have revealed to him who and what they are.
No, I don't care what you think.
It has been made very clear what this society is, and he is still offering to help. He can't force them onto the TARDIS, but he doesn't simply abandon them because they're bad people. And he shouldn't, because that's not who the Doctor should be. The Doctor should not pick and choose who the good people are to save. These people are in danger for their lives. He can help. He's going to try. The only reason he can't is because he can't force them to accept his help. But I think that's really important. It's really important for the character, and it's really important for the show, for the perspective of the show, that these people deserve a chance at life, even though they are terrible. And even though this would have been written well before the current situation going on in places like Palestine, I do find a really strong resonance with that. I don't want to divert on this point too much, but one of the things I very frequently see on social media when particularly LGBTQIA plus people express a desire for, the fighting to stop and for Palestinians to stop dying by the thousands, one of the things that will get thrown at people like me will be, well, if you were over there, they wouldn't be okay with what you are. They'd probably want to kill you. And even if that's true, that doesn't mean they deserve to die. That doesn't mean that their hospitals should be bombed and children should be dying by the hundreds, if not thousands. Just because these people are white supremacists doesn't mean they deserve to die. There are people out there who I very much would like to not have influence, to not have a voice that is listening to and is guiding society or culture or governments or the military or whatever. That doesn't mean that I think they deserve to die. And having the doctor embody that, to learn what they are and still try and help, that is so important. And it's not even about redemption. He's not trying to redeem them. He's just trying to make it so they don't drop dead. I don't think he has too many illusions about redeeming them. I mean, that's interpreted on my part, but this is not about trying to save their souls. This is about trying to save their lives. But they turn it down. And it's very fitting. Honestly, it is the correct ending for this story. Because white supremacy is isolating and self-destructive. Ultimately, it leads people down a path that is just as harmful to them as anybody else. And they walk it willingly. And I think it would have been harmful to have these people as a whole abandon that philosophy and go with the doctor, because I don't want to say that any one individual is irredeemable. But when people choose their bubble, and many people do, when they choose to stay in their bubble, particularly if it's a white supremacist bubble, the odds of them stepping out of it willingly, especially at the prompting of the people that they have been conditioned to hate,
I was so right to hate you,
is very unlikely. And sending a message of, oh, they just need to be put in a situation where they understand the value of another person. No, a single event like that is not going to turn somebody around. Might some of these people realize later? I mean, maybe with time and thought, but they'll probably also die. And I think it helped that we had somebody like Ricky September to show that even within the bubble, there are some people who are less all-encompassing with it. Because Ricky did step out of his bubble now and then. And again, interpretable on my part, I'd like to think Ricky probably would have gone with the doctor, but he's dead. And again, coming back to what I mentioned before, how this form of communication, this form of I am with all you people because we're the same race, the same age, and have a similar amount of financial privilege, and therefore I surround myself with you, that doesn't actually build community. That's why it was so easy for her to throw Ricky under the bus. This builds connections, but not relationships. It doesn't build actual community. I think that's pretty core to all this as well. The only reason all these people are together is because they are young, well-off, and white. Do they actually share much in common beyond that? Who knows? Because their job is to smile and be toxically positive and to act as if all of this is as it should be. That's the role that they've been assigned. They all do it. Even Ricky does that. On his own time, he goes out and touches grass, but he still has to put on the face, and he did. And again, that doesn't mean he should have died. Doesn't mean any of the rest of these people should die, but they're probably gonna. This stuck with me because realizing that there were all these hints, and I should have noticed a lot sooner, that made the point so much harder. It just drove it home so much deeper. And I hope that even if people, especially white people, watching this, clocked what was going on a lot sooner than I did and realized what all these things meant, instead of, like in my case, noticing some of them, but not actually thinking about why is that the case, just noticing, oh, that's odd, but not doing anything with that thought. Even if you noticed earlier, I hope that you'll still have a similar takeaway at least. I think this hit me harder because it hammered me with the fact of I really should have noticed this, and I didn't. And that's not a fault of the storytelling. It's a fact of me as a white person. And no, I'm not ashamed to be white. The show didn't make me feel guilty for being white. The show made me remember my own blind spots due to my own privilege. The major privilege that I have in my life is, yes, being white, but I don't feel guilty. It's something that I need to be reminded of now and then. And I appreciate this episode doing it. And one final note, this is the first episode that we haven't had a reminder of the snow with Ruby, which I didn't really notice and didn't give any significance to until I saw this tweet.
Snow is good. While there's snow, there's hope.
Yeah, I didn't know where else to put this, but fuck. Oh, Dot and Bubble. This was something. This is 2 episodes in a row that are stellar. And even if I don't super love the next 2, these 2 episodes alone make this season worth it, even though I would have preferred there be more episodes. But what did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments and let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills, enables me to do this as my living, even if you can't help me out that way. Like, share, subscribe also help, but don't worry too much about it. What I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. Just remember to step out of your bubble. Now to give my thanks to my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfula, Barasalita, Oliver B., Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Jean Foray, Ulrich Bogdan, Loki Eris, Melinda Walters, Jen, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Bernabi Likes the Poodle, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, White Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Toka Blahuvian, Pau Barabajagal, and Mara G. Thank you so much for your support. You can get your name said, maybe even correctly, in the Patreon support tiers. Also, it helps me feed these little buggers.